What's good, everybody? This episode of the podcast is sponsored by DistroKid. They are the go-to for digital music distribution and the easiest way for musicians to get their music onto Spotify, iTunes, Amazon, TikTok, YouTube, and more. They offer unlimited uploads, and artists keep 100% of their earnings, getting your music onto platforms and into stores 10 to 20 times faster than any other distributor. They help with cover song clearance, automatic splits, and they offer all kinds of tools and templates to help you get the most visibility for your releases. I dig this company and appreciate their business model that offers more features and tools than any other distributor while doing it at the most affordable price for solo artists, bands, DJs, studio artists, and any other creators that are making music or producing music in their home, and they offer label services as well. They've got 3 different tiers that they offer to creators that start as low as $22.99 a year. That's just $1.92 a month. And even their top tier is only $7.50 per month. And the best part about DistroKid sponsoring the podcast is they are offering Dan Cable Presents listeners 30% off their first year of service with DistroKid, making their affordable prices even cheaper for you. I will put that discount link in the episode notes. It will also be in my Instagram bio. Big shout out to DistroKid for sponsoring this podcast for more than 3 years now. Much appreciated. Now let's get into the episode.
Look down at the
What is happening, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Dan Cable Presents podcast. Thank you for tuning into the program once again. If this is your first time listening, thanks for checking out the show. You can find fresh episodes coming at you on Tuesdays. And if you want to help support this thing in a free way, you can do so by clicking subscribe on iTunes, clicking write a review, giving the podcast 5 stars if you feel like it is deserving of so. And that will help propel this thing into the tops of those iTunes charts, giving it more visibility on the national and international levels, helping strangers find the podcast, and just a great way to contribute to the growth and sustainability of this thing. Appreciate the hell out of all the folks that have already taken the time to do so. If you're not listening on Apple, just hit like, follow, subscribe wherever you are listening from. If you're watching on YouTube, please leave a comment there, penetrate that algorithm, raise the signal of this thing. And tell a friend about the podcast if you're listening regularly, enjoying what's happening here. That's always much appreciated as well. This week on the podcast, Portland, Oregon-based singer, songwriter, and bud Jacob Miller makes his return to the podcast. Stoked to have this dude back on. Our first chat was back in 2020. And that was also our first hang, and since then we have become buds and have a lot of mutual friends. He's just a great songwriter and killer guitar player overall, aside from getting to see him play a lot of his own sets over these last 5 years. I've also gotten to see him play quite a bit as a sideman for other people. He's got a brand new EP called In a Season of Loving, my favorite collection of tunes he's put out thus far. And this was just a super fun chat, one of my favorites of the year. I really enjoyed the things that Jacob dove into during this chat, and just his thoughts on where he's at with songwriting at this point in his life, and his approach to making music and being a creative. Just seems like he's in a great place, and definitely gave me a lot to think about as I was listening back to this one, doing the edits. And if you live in the Portland area and you want to see Jacob play live, he's playing the next installment of my Sunday Coffee music series in just a couple weeks, April 13th at Clay Street Studios. These are intimate performances that are live recorded with only 35 available seats, all ages, coffee provided, noon to 2, something early in the day, something easy to commit to that, doesn't leave you out and about till midnight on a Sunday. Music starts at 12:30, so If you enjoy this chat, can't encourage you enough to come by that day, see Jacob play a set, and definitely check out his new EP. Grab a ticket while you can for that. Like I said, there's only 35 available seats, and I know that some of the tickets are already gone. So that ticket link will be in the episode notes. It's also in my Instagram bio, and all the links for Jacob and myself will also be in the episode notes, so you can keep up with him. And with all that, we are going to get into this thing, episode 442 with Jacob Miller, and we are kicking the episode off with a track from that new EP. This is the opening track to it. It's called Cherry Blossoms. Now let's do the damn thing.
Keeping quiet as the day starts. Whisper good morning, but you're still seeing stars. When you open your eyes, you'll find that spring has arrived. Cherry blossoms bloom like static, suspended around us. Sunlight dances and lends new life to all that seek its touch.
This?
Not really.
Any concerns?
I assume you'll just ask me some. We'll just gab. Basically,
We'll gab.
Any like penetrating questions?
Yeah, hard hitting. Really gonna, put you. It's like a gotcha thing. We're gonna.
This is actually an episode of Punk'd.
Yeah, we're gonna get all the hot takes out of you.
Yeah, all right.
We're basically here to ruin your
dismantle
career.
what little of a career I have. Sorry, that was too self-deprecating.
Yeah, the last time that you did this though was almost 5 years ago. I came to your backyard when you were living in the Woodstock neighborhood.
That's so crazy. Well, it's funny you say that, which I don't know if I want you to include this on the pod, but like this, literally, I think like today is 5 years ago that my episode on The Voice aired.
Oh, crazy.
Which is so weird that it's been like 5 years.
Yeah, it is crazy that much time has already passed. I don't know if it's like the pandemic
I
thing
think,
like really alters the time.
Yeah, I think there's some like time warp definitely of like 2 or 3 years that like happened because it was such a odd period of like this void of performances and shows and stuff. So I think it feels like a weird like
I mean, we did that in your backyard. That was one of the only podcasts I had done in person in forever. Like we did it intentionally in your backyard for social distancing.
It must
purposes.
have been like a little into the summer then.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
And it was kind of like, felt like it was right after your whole voice experience, and we kind of like
we
dove
gabbed
into your music background, and we talked about your experience on The Voice, and but now it's 5 years later, Jacob.
Wow. What have I done?
I mean, that's what I'm here to ask you. Like what have you been doing?
We're gonna unearth this together.
Yeah. Also, I'm stoked to have you on this time though, because that might have been the first time we ever hung out.
I think it was.
And
I think it was actually in person, yeah.
Now I feel like we are friends.
Yeah.
And like we see each other
legitimately
somewhat often.
Yeah.
And we travel in like a familiar friend circle now. So it's even more fun now. I feel
is.
Like
we're comfortable around each other now.
More personable experience.
Definitely.
But thinking about that voice experience being like 5 years ago, like where does that like sit with you now? Because like you definitely like dove into like kind of the behind the scenes of what that looked like when we talked last time, but
yeah,
what does that feel like to you now?
Feels kind of like a fever dream, honestly. Like, it's funny because 5 years ago is, in the grand scheme, it's not that long, but it does feel like a substantial amount of time has passed. And I think like after it happened, jokingly, when people would ask, I would just kind of like self-deprecatingly respond like, just another weird step on this journey of doing music. And it really was, but I guess that's still kind of how I view it in a way, but it feels a little bit more like that actually is what it is. Like, that was the response because I didn't want to go at length talking about it with people, because it was just like, oh my God, I've told this so many times to people, which is fine. I appreciate that people are curious and like want to support me and champion my efforts and stuff. But yeah, I think like looking back, it does feel like just this weird random stop along the way that happened. And I think the fact that like literally, I think it was the week or maybe even the day that COVID really like the at-home measures were put in place was the day my episode aired. So it was very much, secretly traveling to LA because you sign the NDAs and like you're sequestered in the hotel. Like, it felt, certainly at that point I was touring a lot too, and I just released my first solo record. Like, oh, I'm gonna tour like all year. Yeah, like that's what it felt like. So it certainly was like this build to this thing to meet this plateau of the cliff and drop off, where it was like obviously very sad in that way, because it like dashed a lot of my hopes of being on the road and being able to utilize that momentum and let it be another like building block towards a touring career. Yeah, which is something that had been a goal of mine for a long time. But in a way, it's kind of a blessing, because I'm actually really like, I will tour again and that will be a part of my life, but I don't think it will ever be as much of a part of my life as it was in like my mid to late 20s. Life happens and you get older and stuff, but like just the way things are and how difficult it is, expensive it is to take a band on the road for long periods of time and pay them like salary rates of, it's very hard to do. And not to be super depressing or anything, but it's like more of a realist stance where like I feel like I've kind of reframed like the voice experience and then COVID and that whole like plateau, and then like those hopes being kind of dashed in a way due to like the at-home measures and the inability to tour. I think it kind of reframed what music meant to me and how I could actually keep it a sustainable part of my life. Yeah. Whereas like if I was a full-time touring musician now, especially with like the new administration and just the way things are like financially in the world, I would be so lost. I really would be like totally at a loss for, I think, how to move forward in like the economic climate. Yeah. And so in a way, like as unfortunate as like, oh, I want to like when I did the voice, it's like, I'm going to freaking tour Japan this year. And like, I wanted to really go out and do the thing. And in a way, I think it was kind of a blessing, because like I have explored a lot of different other facets of music, including like education and like leading workshops and sync music and composition work and session work and like other things that actually bring me a lot of joy. Yeah. So it's like, that was such a long-winded response to your question.
This is what we're here. I'm here for all, like, you're doing a great job as a guest if you're giving long-winded responses. When I go to edit this, I want to see very few parts where my track even has movement. Fair enough.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Yeah. I mean, there's also, it's interesting, like you're saying, it allowed you to explore these other facets of like making music and being creative. But, in a world where you won The Voice, like maybe you get like that financial boost in some way, but like maybe you get cornered into people thinking that
that's the thing,
that is, you're calling the one dynamic. And I don't know. That also seems, it doesn't seem like that many people who have won those types of shows have gone on to have like really successful, sustainable careers.
I think you become kind of like not a one-hit wonder, but like, I mean, and again too, I don't mean to belittle anyone who does that show or anything, because it's like there are a lot of incredibly talented people, obviously, that are like performers and singers and some songwriters, that like try to engage and use that as a tool to propel their career. And I've seen like a few people, like my buddy Thunderstorm, and he actually just tried out for American Idol and he like got his golden ticket to go to Hollywood, and I recognize that as a accessible opportunity for some people to propel their career, and like, oh, like I want to do songwriting for other people and have my own career. It's like that allows you to make connections that can be lifelong lasting. Like I have like 4 or 5 friends that I met at The Voice that I like stay in touch with like regularly, and I've seen their careers really blossom and they've found themselves and grown so much. And so yeah, it's interesting, but I don't think like my goal doing it, I thought it was just hilarious that I was there in the first place because it's like I literally had never seen the show, and I was very vocal when I got asked to audition, and then somehow found my way to LA and was in front of this room of producers. I was like, I hate shit like this. Like they're like, why do you want to be on The Voice? And I was like, I actually hate shit like this. I've never seen the show. And I was like, I don't think the values of a program like this align with my values as a musician and what like music and songwriting means to me. And that's not to villainize the thing. It's this capitalistic commercial $100 million industry. Like that's really what it is. And cool, make the program and make the money and like have people on, and hopefully they can build a career from it. But the entire time it was kind of like this unbelievable joke to me. And again, I don't say that to say it's meaningless by any means. It's more of like, it was hilarious to me that I was even there, because it's like, I'm not the high note do runs type of guy. And I actually really appreciate that they saw someone doing what I was doing, like primarily songwriting and focusing on like the themes and message of songs as opposed to being really performatively flashy. And see a place for me on the program. Like that's actually kind of progressive and cool.
Yeah. And I'm sure they really liked that you knew your way around the guitar.
Yeah. And like I'd go to like the band was like Cher's band leader and like all these head session LA guys. And like I had such a good rapport with those dudes and like would bullshit with them. And I would arrange all my own pieces with the band, whereas everyone else was just having the band do it. And like, it certainly allowed an opportunity for me to kind of go in after having led like a 7-piece band for like 7 years and be like, oh, I know what the fuck I'm doing. And not to be like big headed or anything, but it was more of like, I think an opportunity for me to recognize how much I had learned doing music full time in the years prior to that experience. And it really just reaffirmed like, this is kind of this silly capitalistic thing, but I'm working with, you know, people that have been in the industry, and I felt validated, you know. I felt, especially by like the session band, it's like all these people. And I remember the last song that I did was this Post Malone song. That was like the last round I was in on the show, and I made this arrangement that was like really kind of like Americana, weird folk. And the band leader, I had like this super weird like dissonant chord in my arrangement, and he's like, I don't think we should do this. And the guitarist, who was like, he was I think Pink's guitarist or something like that, he's like, Paul, to the band leader, he's like, Paul, just, it's his thing, like let him do his thing. And so like I think they were probably like, this guy's not gonna win, but we're gonna advocate for him to do his weird thing while he's here. And that was actually really refreshing, you know, because you don't really expect that. Like when I came, I said to the producers, like initially entering the show, like, I feel like this is going to be really cutthroat and mean, and like music's not a competition to me. So like, I'll make it through a round or something, and then I'll leave and I'll keep doing what I have been doing. But Yeah. It's all just very funny.
It's cool that you got validated by the people you wanted to, though, and not like the producers, but like these heavy players in the band, where you're just like, oh, sweet. Like, they're not giving me a whole lot of direction, or like maybe there's like that little bit of pushback from the MD, but then you have this other person who's speaking up for you, like, no, man, let Jacob fucking cook.
Totally. Exactly. And
Just give me a sign. Should I do it tonight? I'll admit that I'm scared. Don't wanna lose my mind. But Tommy said it was cool. Don't think twice, just come by after school. Yeah, they'd all done it before. Just don't forget the secret knock for the front door. Blue velvet poster stacks of magazines. Skip most of my classes, planet Earth.
Where do you feel like you're
on TV.
at with music now, or just creating art in general? Or what do you feel like has changed in this like last 5 years for you?
I mean, big question.
I'm expecting a long-winded
Very, very long-winded answer. Yeah, well, I released a record like a year after the voice stuff around my head, and I'm proud of that record. I think I've grown a lot in my songwriting since then.
Absolutely.
And I think a lot of the music, like my first and that second record around my head, are like quite melancholic and like quite depressing, to be totally honest. And that's great, but it feels like I'm kind of in a new season, for lack of a better word, of writing and producing, and even just kind of what I want to be doing with my music, where my band before doing solo stuff was this really high energy jazz band. And we did like roots and Americana music and very throwback kind of vintage stuff, and very influenced by like American traditional blues and all that type of music. And so when I started doing solo stuff, I wanted to be like sad boy, moody, like songwriter guy. And I think in the last couple of years, I've really come to this place where I'm like, how do I word this? Like, self-aware enough to realize that like not only does no one want that, but like I also don't want to like take myself too seriously.
Yeah.
And it feels so obvious to say out loud, but it's like I think when people are doing music, especially full time, it feels like such a representation of like their worth or like their identity. And I think people naturally want to feel like they're taken seriously. And it's really easy to fall too hard into that trope, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so I think the first few years I was doing solo music, I so badly wanted to not be the thing I was before that I went really hard into this direction of like melancholic singer-songwriter, sad boy guy. And I'm really proud of that music that I made, but I'm at a place now where like I'm in a very loving, healthy, safe relationship. I have a really amazing community of creatives and just wonderful humans around me. And I have so much to like express joy for that I feel like my music can express so much more emotion than this one color or lens.
Yeah.
And it's been really like liberating actually. And so I released that record in 2022, and then in I think it was the end of 2023 or maybe the spring of 2024, I released a covers EP, and that was just like a fun, really jovial kind of throw stuff at the wall till it sticks type of experiment. Like we went in the studio for one day and tracked 4 tunes, and it was kind of just a practice of not being precious.
Yeah.
And that actually really inspired me to record like this next set of music that I have coming out this year. I just released an EP, 4 original tunes, and I'll be releasing a record later this year. And all of that, this new music feels so much more expressive on a spectrum as opposed to kind of this one color. And I love arranging and I love writing. I really love performing and collaborating with people. And this kind of new era has been an exploration of all of those things, where when I made the first 2 records, I recorded the first one entirely myself in that Woodstock house, like played everything except some horn lines and some strings basically. And I was so like, I've got to do everything myself, and the only person who can do it is me. And I think it was very self-indulgent, and I think I actually needed that process to get to where I am at now with that, where I recognize I have so many amazing musicians and artists in my sphere that I'm lucky, grateful to be around and be inspired by, be challenged by. And with this process, I really wanted to invite people that I trust in to challenge me and to allow these songs and these ideas and arrangements to like blossom and exceed the expectation of like, it's this one thing that I've created, where there's like this ceiling that I've created. And I want to like blast the hell out of that ceiling with the help of all these amazing people, because they can bring things to the table that just far exceed that expectation and like blow it out of the water.
Yeah.
We're even making this record. It's like my buddy Sam and Tejas and Danny were kind of like the core band. And I very vocally in the beginning of the process of like recording and pre-proing the record was like, if you don't like the bridge, tell me you don't like the bridge and we'll cut it. Like, I don't want you to necessarily dictate how the song's going to be, but I want you guys to be honest in what feels right when we're creating like the soundscapes and like what this is going to actually sound like.
Yeah.
And I think that allowed especially the EP to just be this like it's like not one color like I feel like a lot of these things in the past that I've put out have been, which again, I'm proud of those things. I think they sound great, like the arrangements, and like I painstakingly went through and did that, and again it was quite self-indulgent. And it was all me, where I don't know, when you don't allow room for other things to influence you. I mean, I was influenced by the things I was listening to, but having this real-time rapport with other people allowed things to just blossom in a way they really couldn't have had I done it entirely alone.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, like in the beginning of this process of recording, I was quite vocal about like, I want to know the opinions and like, let's turn things on their head. Like one song was really fast and upbeat, almost like kind of not a punk song, but like pretty driving floor tom drum, like 4 on the floor vibe. And at the end of it on this new record that's coming out in the fall, like it is the opening track to the record. And it's like this swamp drone, super slow song. And I never would have expected it to get to this place. But again, these people that decided to do this with me, like all of our efforts combined really allowed, I feel like, the songs sonically to represent the lyrics and the themes and all these things so much more like expressively than had I stuck to some of the original ideas when we started writing the songs.
Yeah.
Or when I started writing the songs, excuse me.
Kind of cornered into your own capabilities as a listener and a songwriter, where, yeah, it's a beautiful thing when you have like other people around you that you really trust their tastes and like can, trust their ears as well, and just say, oh, like maybe I'm not able to hear this in certain ways because I'm so close to it.
Yeah. And you get so married to like some original idea that it's like you don't allow there to be room for something better to come along,
Yeah.
Which is just interesting. It's like I think ego plays such a huge part in that, because you really, whether you're self-aware enough to be, I don't know, mindful of it, or it's this subconscious thing, we want to be perceived in some way, like no matter what, even if you're like fully enlightened or something. And like no matter what, we all want to be perceived in some way, and it's like, can you actually allow yourself to make mistakes and like let go of that idea of yourself? And I've certainly struggled with that a lot, but like I think this process of recording this new music has been really like liberating in some of those ways, where I've been able to let go of some of these like old ideas of how I want my stuff to be perceived, because like everyone's gonna have their own perception of the same thing, and it's gonna be very different, you know.
Yeah, and you've been doing this long enough where you're still gonna speak up with this group of friends that you're making the music with when you're like, no, I really am tied to this.
Yeah,
like
totally.
This is very important, and you're obviously surrounding yourself with people that also trust your vision, and they don't want to like get in the way, and they want to just compliment and make the greatest recording of this song
reach its full potential and like serve the song and totally. Yeah. When I say that, I definitely don't mean that I'm like so willing to forego any of my ideas or like things that I'm set on, but it was just much more of an open discussion as to like what these could look like.
Yeah.
And we live tracked the EP and the record. So it was like this really cool process, which we did with the covers EP, and that hadn't really been part of my process before. I would multi-track a lot because I've been, again, like I've got to do everything myself, and it's got to be perfect and flawless. And when we were live tracked the covers EP, like all 4 songs in one day, it was very off the cuff and like shoot from the hip. And the performances just felt so much more alive. And it was surprised me, because it's like, oh, but it wasn't the 14th vocal take, or, whatever. And
maybe it wasn't technically the perfect one.
Yeah, but it has more energy and like honesty, maybe you could call it.
So much feel like to this collection of tunes, the In a Season of Loving. Like there's definitely a next level that man. Have like hit with the capturing of these recordings that do feel very alive and real, and like they don't feel robotic in any way.
Thanks, man.
It doesn't feel like you were on a 14th take.
No, we did nothing to a click either. I appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah, and those songs are all so like with trying to kind of like create music that's a bit more on like an emotional spectrum as opposed to like this one flavor. I feel like the EP, which was kind of its intention, is like all the 4 songs are so different.
Yeah.
Like the first song, Cherry Blossoms, is very Americana, rootsy, like open D tuning, finger picking, like almost like American traditional kind of energy, like a Charlie Parr or like some more modern kind of American traditional stuff. And then Dropping Acid is like this raucous tune about taking psychedelics, and
so good, dude.
And it's just all over the place. It's psychotic. There's like gang vocals on it, and mellotron, and ripping electric guitar, and so different than the first track, which is like stripped folk music.
Yeah, but it's still, this killer pop song. Like it has all these pop sensibilities.
Totally.
Like the hook is so easy to fall into and like sing along with, and
thanks, man. Yeah, it's fun. It was an old song I wrote during a songwriting challenge with some friends, like write a song about psychedelics, and it's about just like taking acid when I was 18 in college with my oldest friend Eric. And like, yeah, I think this is like full circling back to this idea of like taking yourself too seriously because you want to be perceived in this particular way. I think I would have had a hard time putting that song out a few years ago.
Yeah.
Because I don't know, like, is it not serious enough? Is it too goofy? It's not. It doesn't fit the profile of this type of music I'm trying to make.
Doesn't fit the profile of the dude who just did the voice.
Yeah, totally.
Dropping Acid.
Yeah. Well, and it's so funny too, because I have had actually quite a few people who've been listening to my music for a really long time be like, that's my favorite song you've ever put out.
I mean, no doubt.
It like got played on KEXP, and like, it's just funny. It's like in a sense almost reinforces this idea of like, just make the thing.
It's
just have fun and trust yourself and make the
Yeah.
thing. It's like, I mean, we were talking about this before we started the pod, but like, no one cares. At the end of the day, no one gives a shit about anything but what they've got going on in their life. Like, of
Yeah.
course, people reach out to their community and we have friends and people and things we care about, but like, more often than not, when you're doom scrolling on your phone, that video that the artist spent 3 weeks color grading and audio editing and all this stuff, you're going to watch 3.4 seconds of it and move on to the next thing in between all the terrifying news things. You know, it's just, it really kind of puts things into perspective where it's like, oh, wait to put this out. And I have absolutely been a victim of my own making to that, where it's like, oh, this needs to be perfect before I put it out in the world. Where really, I think this process, and even where I'm at now, like months after recording these things, and we're in the the post-production for the record project, it does like kind of just put things into perspective where you should just honor the art and make it and have fun, and it's kind of inconsequential what happens to it at the end of the day.
Yeah.
You just hope people like it, and then if they don't, that's okay. You move on to the next thing.
Yeah.
You like it.
The stupid amount of time that I've like spent on picking the correct text for the captions on the videos, on the clips for the podcast. And it's just like, nobody cares, man. Is it a good clip or is it not a good clip? Because the
Too relatable, honestly.
the text and font that you choose is not going to change whether that's a good clip or not.
Totally.
You know?
But it's, I think in the digital age of like things constantly asking or demanding your attention, we're convinced that like this one thing is going to turn the tide for you or something.
Yeah.
Which like, okay, maybe it will. Maybe something like that does happen, but you don't want one particular thing to completely define you as your identity, your career, your art, you know, like, and in that, I guess it kind of again reinforces this idea of like, just make the thing and have fun.
Yeah.
And like, don't let your influences or what you feel you need to be perceived as dictate what you sacrifice or decide to add on to this thing to make it more digestible.
Yeah.
I think that's been something I like hate to admit, and I'm sure a lot of artists struggle with this, but like it's tough not to feel like you need to curate your things to people to make it a little bit more digestible, like whether that is a self-aware tendency or a more subconscious thing. I think it's just a natural part of making art where you want to like tamper what you're making in a way so it reaches more people. But I think the most honest art really does neglect those. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I started recording myself eating tuna sandwiches, and I had no idea that anybody would care about that. But
You're
it like
Tuna Boy
seemed
now.
to be. Yeah. Now I'm just Tuna Boy. Like nobody even knows about this podcast. They're just like, oh, it's the Tuna Boy guy. I was like, sick, dude. That's awesome because that's like,
actually wild.
it's funny because it also is, you know, going back to what I was saying when we first started talking, as far as not really knowing you the first time that we did this.
Yeah.
Now knowing you, this like EP to me really does like feel like this more authentic representation of who I know you to be now, because like a song like Dropping Acid is a little goofy and fun, but like you're goofy and fun.
I'm a goofy guy.
And you're a sweet dude.
Thanks,
and like
man.
you're writing these like fucking sweet love songs, and like you can feel it in the music that like the authenticity like really is there, I think, you know.
Thanks.
And I think
That's
there's
really nice to hear.
I think that's why people, you know, do have that sort of feedback of Dropping Acid's my favorite song you've ever written, or when people are telling me like the Tuna Boy is my favorite shit that you do, because it's just like fun and goofy.
And it probably is like one of the more true things to our actual personalities that like the people we know of us, right?
Yeah.
Because again, that whole idea of like how we want to be perceived or something, and it's like everyone wants to seem like they have their shit together, Like, of course, we live in a society that's based on like productivity and like literally grinding your body away.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, it's only natural that we're going to want to, I don't know, seem like highly productive people that completely have their shit together, but like no one does. Like nobody does. And certainly there are like crazy people that wake up at 5 a.m. and cold plunge and like get a billion things done all day, every day. But it's like, we're all human. And again, that ego comes into play with all of this, where it's like, thank you for the comment. I think, yeah, this more honest approach, or like, oh, this is too goofy, or this is, I don't know, like too fun to put, like if
not insightful enough or something,
not like profound enough or something.
Right.
And it sounds so like pretentious to even put it that way. But again, I think like the intersection of like art and the ego, it's natural for that to arise. And it's cool. I mean, I'm working on myself every day, but it's cool to be getting more to a place with music. And I think it is just a part of getting older, where I just want to make stuff that feels more true to my experience right now in my life. And it's like, again, I'm in a loving relationship and I have a great community, and I have a lot of things that I just feel like in a non-religious way, like very blessed to have. And like, I have a very bountiful life I'm really grateful for. And it's like, okay, like I'm gonna write like 5 love songs that are like kind of cheesy, but like they're pretty fucking fun, and I like them.
Yeah.
I don't need to be like sad boy, you know?
Yeah, I do think that's, you know, like you said, it's a part of it's getting older, and a part of it's just putting the reps in. Like, you needed to make that record by yourself to feel good at that time.
And to like
you
let
know?
go of this idea that I need to do everything myself. I think too, where it's like, I see the benefit of collaborating with people and like involving the community, because it makes it better. Like, you can do everything yourself, and of course people do that on a budget, and it's like there are different variables that come into play, and I'm really fortunate to be in a place where I can pay my friends and like involve people and make it worth their time, because a lot of people don't have those resources or even people they can call upon. So I'm you know, not bashing anyone who's recording their records themselves. It's more of a practice of like, that was again like this ego thing, like I need to do it myself to have this perception that like I can do it all. And at the end of the day, I'm just really realizing even this, I should be on the road X amount of months a year to feel like I'm a real musician or whatever, and letting go of some of these really hardline things that I've set for, like these things I've set for myself, has been so healing, because it's like I am just as much of a musician if I don't tour at all this year as if I was touring 8 months and going to Europe twice. And I know like we're conditioned through so much like doom scrolling and social media and all these things where like the industries, whether you're in like video industry or visual art or music, like of course there are so many others as well, but like we all follow people, and those are we're influenced, you know, by all of these things around us, and we set this expectation of how things are done in a legitimate and professional manner. And then we hold ourselves to these expectations where it's like, these are things that are being accomplished with a lot of funding, a lot of money, and a team of teams of like 20, 10, whatever, 5 people, whatever. And then you look, well, why am I not performing at this level, or why aren't things lining up for me in this way? And it's like, you're one human that's like super messed up and flawed like everyone else, but it's like holding yourself to that expectation and then creating these kind of hard lines around like, well, you're not enough of a this thing unless you're doing it at this level. And I'm, you know, continuously working on letting go of these kind of like constructs. But I feel like the last 2 years has been very healing for me in that way, because I know in my 20s I really prided myself on being like a road dog, and like that sounds so lame though, or like, you know, someone who's just traveling on the road a lot, gigging multiple times a week, you know, playing all the time. And I respect anyone who's doing that because it's a really exhausting and tough life. And like, I don't want to do that anymore.
Yeah.
And I'm not less of a musician because I'm not doing that. And certainly that's like reassuring myself in this moment. But like, it's also very true. It's like, I'm still going to compose music and teach and write my own music and make records. And whatever capacity I'm doing that in, every day's different. I'm engaging in like different types of projects all the time, whether it's like session work or co-writing with people or whatever. It's all music, baby. like it's all the thing that I love.
Yeah.
Just because I'm not going and playing a bunch of shows that are more tiring than fulfilling, you know, doesn't make me less of the thing that I want to be perceived
for sure.
as. But I think, again, it goes back to that ego and perception of like, I really want to be perceived in this way.
Yeah.
And again, I think so much of that is self-imposed, where it's like, you look at, I mean, in maybe my lowest state of feeling like I need to meet this perception I'm setting for myself, it's like I am projecting this bar that I'm setting for myself on everyone around me. And I'm like, oh, all of these people are looking at me through this lens that I've created. And it's all my, like a prison of my own making. In that way, that's a little dark, I realize. But I think
So true, though.
It really, I mean, again, I'll speak to my own experience. I don't want to put that on anyone else, but like, I think a lot of, I would imagine quite a few people could relate to that, where it's like, we're exposed to all of these people who make it look effortless to do all these amazing things. And it's like, they're not doing that alone, but a lot of independent artists are, and they feel like they're not doing enough. And it's a trip.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think all those, you know, those experiences of you grinding on the road and things like that, obviously, like, have really informed the lens. And I'm sure that time in your life you became like, it really set great foundation for you as a player and being able to just like pick up the thing and do the thing because you put so many reps in. And like, yeah, just I think those experiences are valuable, and I think it's valuable that you made a record by yourself so that I bet you're a better communicator in the room making a record because of that having that experience of doing something on your own. Like, maybe that's not the route you go anymore, but you're capable of doing it. So I think that maybe makes in some way makes the voice a little more, not the voice, the show, but your voice in the room, like maybe easier to communicate when you're making a record.
And again, too, it's like, even like all the time that I was trying to like be on the road, it's like, I did that because I loved it. It wasn't solely for the purpose of like, I need to meet this quota that I think others expect from me. But in retrospect, I think I have more of a understanding, and like, I'm far enough away from it now where I have more of honest understanding of what maybe it was for me that was driving some of those decisions. Yeah. But again, I'm grateful for all those opportunities, like my jazz band and doing that solo record and touring a lot. It's all brought me to this place in my life where, like, again, I've really reframed what music like should be, or I would like it to be in my life. And I'm really grateful for that. Like, it's been a weird journey, you know, like, yeah, a lot of just different random stops and gigs and opportunities and shortcomings and disappointments, like, you know, a spectrum of experience and emotions. But it's all led me to this. And yeah, it just makes you really reflect on like some of the lowest points in my entire life are actually the most, I look back and I'm so grateful for some of the like awful shit that I've gone through, like, for lack of better word, or like some really low lows that I've experienced, because it has given me the perspective to really appreciate kind of like how things have come to be now.
Yeah.
And even like, maybe I don't want to be touring several months out of the year at this point in my life. Maybe I will in 5 years or something, but that doesn't mean I don't want to play shows anymore. Like, it's more like I'd like to play like a good couple handfuls of great shows a year and focus on writing and co-writing with people and you know, composing and stuff. It's like, you don't have to do one thing. And I think for again, like this productivity mindset, it's like, and this idea of identity with art, you want to be this one thing, or you want to be seen or perceived as a master of one, and it's just unrealistic.
Yeah.
It's just unrealistic. Certainly people are. There are certainly people doing that, and like props, like that's incredible. But it's not for me.
Yeah, and it's not obviously like the thing that's helping you be sustainable in creating art. You
Yeah.
know, that mindset is not beneficiary.
We're all
to-
multifaceted people. Like you could be an amazing chef, but it's like you're more than the food you make. You're a husband or a son, or like we are complex, messed up individuals. And it's
Yeah.
like we transcend this one thing that we do. And again, I'm like speaking to my own experience or whatever, but I think it's so easy to get wrapped up in this idea of identity and what that looks like, and then at least myself projecting that expectation you set upon yourself on how others perceive you. And it's like, again, this kind of like hamster wheel you find yourself in of your own making, where it's like, I am so much more than just a songwriter. Like I am a brother, and I'm a friend, and I love to cook, and there's so many
This guy loves to play video games.
Yeah, totally. With my nephew. It's sick. I love doing that. And like, that's the only time we talk actually now, because he's obsessed with video games. But like, it's just interesting. Like, I don't know how quickly that you can get wrapped up in that kind of line of thinking.
Do you feel like there's anything in particular that is like attributed to these shifts in mindset, or is it all just like some of all of the experiences?
I think it's like a kind of a culmination of like just again getting older, and like I think COVID, like we were talking about in the beginning of the pod, like definitely had a big effect of, oh, I'm not going to be able to tour anymore, and I found so much of my identity in being a touring musician.
Yeah.
Because I had such a scarcity mindset when I was in my 20s, because I was such a gig to gig musician, and I really prided myself on being able to do a lot with nothing. And that was like, I think again, part of my identity, where it's like, oh, like I live gig to gig. I've got $200 in my bank account. I'm all good. Like I can, and it was like a sense of pride,
A badge of honor.
yeah,
to wear.
a badge of honor. And it's actually like, I don't hold judgment for my past self or anything. Like that was the place I was in my life, but it's a little cringe, like to look back on. And yeah, again, like no judgment, but I think being forced to like not being able to tour really shifted how not only I viewed myself, because music was such a huge part of my identity, but how I wanted to move forward, where it's like, oh, I'm approaching 30. What do I know I want music to be a big part of my life for the rest of my life, but what does that actually look like in a way that I can sustainably do that is actually fulfilling as well, right? And it's like, do I teach more? And I did that. I've led songwriting workshops, and I had this opportunity during COVID to like go to New York and like teach at this school for 2 weeks in Chelsea. And like, that was a cool opportunity. But then I was like, oh, I don't want to teach full time. Like It was really cool, but it was like, I don't want this to be my one thing. And I think I've kind of slowly gigging, private gigs, a little bit of touring here and there, again, like co-writes and doing some sync music stuff, and then focusing on my own records. I found a way to kind of, I think, find this balance where I like to be home. I don't want to like go out on the road for the sake of just being there. Like I have so much here in Portland that I'm like grateful for, and like an amazing community I want to spend time with and be involved in.
Yeah.
And like, I don't want to be gone for the sake of being busy and doing this thing that I can do in a different facet here. And it's just as meaningful, if not more, to me.
Yeah. Just so the poster has more dates.
Exactly. Actually that. And it's like this optics game that no one gives a shit about it except me subconsciously. And then you're like, yeah, like miserable or something. And it's all quite silly. And it's all quite like, altruist in a way too, where it's like, I've got to be this. It's I've joked about this with friends before, where it's like doing music full time is such a like martyr thing to kind of do in a way, which again, like, I'm not throwing shade to anyone doing music. That's not what I'm trying to say. But it is like, unfortunately, there's so much shameless self-promotion, and there's, you know, just like, I'm dedicating my life to my art and I'm struggling. And it's like, you know, that's literally the life of a musician. And again, like, I've been doing it my whole life, so I'm not throwing shade to anyone who's actually doing that. But it is a absolutely hilarious decision to like, and it's you have to really fucking believe in it in order to dedicate your life to it. So again, I get the sacrifice. Like, there are so many sacrifices that you make that, quite frankly, like, family and other people don't understand. Like, they don't understand, and that's okay, because you believe and love the thing so much that you still do it. But at the end of the day, it is quite funny.
Yeah, there is something to, like, you know, whether it's music or visual art, the struggling artist, you know, and
the tortured genius.
Yeah. And,
maybe not ever.
And again, no shade to the people that are doing it. I'm like, on some level, you know, trying to juggle all of these things to make a life work without a 9-to-5. So like,
totally,
I totally get it. But I do think sometimes I have to like check myself and be like, nobody asked you to do this or live your life this way, you know? And I think it's great that we have so many incredible people that are compelled to make art, and like some of them get to do it for a living, and it's obviously enriching our lives to have all of this art. It certainly has, you know, changed my life and has impacted the way I want to operate as a human. Totally. And like what I want to try to dedicate my time to. But nobody asked me to start this podcast. So like bitching about not being able to make a living off of it or something does feel a little silly sometimes.
Yeah, no, it is. I guess there's like that element of self-awareness is, I think, good to keep in check alongside like the struggle, which is very real. And it's like someone dedicating their life to something that they're totally in love with and actually finding a way to make that work. How brave and beautiful is that?
Yeah, you root for those people.
That's actually incredible. So again, like going back to my initial statement about this, like I'm not throwing shade. It is a hilarious thing because it's so unconventional and it's like kind of unrealistic in a big way, but people do it because they love it. And again, like I'm in a very similar boat with that. So I have so much respect, and like if you can find a way to make it work, that is so unbelievably amazing. Yeah. Like that is so cool. But it's like, I think, and again, I'm speaking to my own experience, remember that that's not all you are.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of my biggest takeaways from like the last couple of years is just like, oh, I'm a singer-songwriter. And it's like, that is something you do, but it is not 100% of what makes me, Jacob Miller, up as a person. And I think remembering that is important.
Well, yeah, I think it's even an interesting thing socially when I bet, this is an assumption, but is there a lot of times that you get introduced to somebody and they're like, this is Jacob, he's a really great songwriter?
Yeah.
Or, I mean like, I would say great, but like, I would imagine there's a lot of times where they're like, yeah, this is Jacob. He's a songwriter, you know?
Yeah, or musician or whatever. And it's cool. Like that has been my identity since like high school in a big way. And again, when I go back to this, like the word identity, it's like, that's layered in so many ways, but it's like, yeah, like outward perception, generally that's the take. Yeah. That's the hot take.
Yeah.
It's like, even when me and my partner were just in India for all of February, and we did this 3-week program in Rishikesh, and I told someone, asked me what I did, and I was like, I'm a musician. And within like a day, everyone at the school knew I was a musician, and almost everyone came up individually and asked me like, are you a musician? Like, what do you do? And da 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 da. And it's funny because it seems it's like this, the idea is really romantic and it's kind of like glamorized in a way externally, so it's cool, I guess. But it's funny because it's like, it's not it's not glamorous or it's, I mean, you know what I'm talking about.
Absolutely.
You work with artists and stuff, but it is funny because again, it's this idea of identity and perception that's like, Yeah, it makes sense. It's easy. I do that. That is a big part of who I am and what I do.
Absolutely.
So it makes sense why people would introduce me in such a fashion. But is that my entire person? Like, no.
Yeah. And I think it's, it's not exclusive to the art world. I think that's just how we're kind of conditioned.
Hey, this is my friend. He's
this
a
is
great
Bill.
chef.
He's a banker.
Yeah.
Like,
Totally.
it's like, okay, cool.
Yeah.
What else do you like to do, Bill?
Nothing.
And there is like,
Bank.
there is
All
this
I do
thing,
is bank.
yeah, there's this thing of like glamorizing things that maybe are outside of like a traditional 9-to-5 living or something like
Definitely.
that. When people are like, oh, you tour manage. That's incredible. And it's just like, yeah, it is. Like, I'm super grateful that I get to like travel the country this way, and I get to see music most nights because of it. And, but also it's, I'm
It's actually
not
really hard.
I'm not living extravagantly. Like,
Have you seen Tuna Boy?
does anybody need a TM? Like, I could use another gig to keep this train rolling.
Yeah, so with Tuna Boy sponsorship.
Yeah.
Faded at the TSA. Talk to text each word I say. I'm gone, but I'm home. 'Cause you're here. Now I could fly to Kokomo, catch a breath and take a toke. I'm gone, but I'm home. 'Cause you're here. And I'll be damned if you're not the best thing that happened to me. All my life
Now that
I've been
you've,
petrified of love supreme.
Maybe tapping into more authenticity with the song, this most recent batch of tunes and this new record that's going to come out later this year, is it easy for you to discern when you are writing, when you're not tapping into that? Like when you're leaning into maybe those old ways of...
I think, yeah, like, I guess short answer, there's good days and bad days, you know, where it's like, I think in the past when I've written, I'll make something, not contrived is not the right word, but like I'll tend to overcomplicate things. And a lot of the songwriters, like, I've been enjoying the last few years, there's certainly like complexity and depth to what's happening, whether that be like lyrically or production or like instrumentation arrangement wise. But there's like this overt simplicity that feels so sophisticated. And like even like Paul McCartney stuff, it's like some turn of phrases and melodic ideas are so simple that it just like hits you in the head like, oh my God, why didn't I think of that? It's so simple. And not that everything needs to be simple, but it's like I think when I start to overcomplicate things, I realize that I'm again like, am I challenging myself for the sake of challenging myself, or is it making the song better? And when you like trust your instincts and you write like a couple great lines, it feels right.
Yeah.
You know? And then, oh cool, I've got like 2 good verses and a chorus. I really like this. And then the third verse is just really lacking. And it's like, okay, I'm going to put this down and come back to it when like the right thing comes along. It's interesting. Like, I think writing really comes in waves, and there will be like a month or two where I honestly really struggle to come up with, like, I write melodies every day and sit at the piano and play guitar. But as far as like lyrical things, sometimes it's a few weeks or a month or two that like it's not happening.
Yeah.
You know? And that's okay. 'Cause like, I don't know, sitting down and like engaging in the practice is one thing. Like, sit down and write a shitty song. It's like lifting weights. It's like you're flexing that muscle.
Yeah.
And that's good for you. You should engage in this thing that you love. But it's so easy to literally avoid the things that bring us joy. You know? Like, I love to play music and write songs and play music with people, and I think very often I find excuses to avoid that thing that brings me joy And I think that's from like a protective place of maybe some of those old expectations of I need to write something really profound or I need to do this thing that's really meaningful, when really nothing matters and none of it matters. And actually you just enjoy engaging in this thing that you've loved your whole life. So just do that.
Just do it.
You know, which is, again, like so simple. It's kind of offensive.
Yeah.
But it's true, at least to my own experience. Again, I'll come back to that. But like, yeah, I think things that I've been writing as of late, I'm trying to tap into something that feels a bit more like honest to my own experience, as opposed to this would be fun for someone else to hear.
Yeah.
And very often when I'm actually honoring, like, oh, I'm feeling emotionally this way, so I'm going to write about it. Like, when I'm actually kind of honoring my experience and what I'm going through in my life, that fun for other people to hear comes out naturally because it's a bit more honest. And there's something just a little less contrived about that.
Yeah. You mentioned that Dropping Acid was written from a song prompt.
Yeah.
Or a writing prompt. Is that usually something that's, I don't know, productive for you or successful? Or is it kind of hit or miss?
More often than not, it's actually really good for me. I love a deadline.
Okay.
And I actually like writing with other people because it forces me to finish things. Whereas if I'm like writing a song for myself, I'm the only person holding myself accountable. So it's like, oh, I'll let this linger for 2 years or 2 weeks or whatever. Whereas a lot of the songwriting challenges I've done in the past is like 7 days and 7 songs. So it's like you write a song a day and you don't have time to really think about whether it sucks or not. But in that just like burning through and this tornado of ideas that you don't really second guess and commit to, it's kind of hilarious how often they're actually kind of decent. And so it's funny you ask that because the Portland Songwriters Guild, they do like their 52 song challenge. And I've actually really, upon returning back from our trip in February, been meaning to jump on that, where it's like, I'd love to write a song a week and just do the prompts, even if I never share the songs with anyone. But it's an opportunity for me to have a deadline and just write for the sake of writing and flex those muscles.
The exercise element of it.
And it's funny too, though, because it's like I have literally like 3,000 voice memos in my phone right now, and I have like hundreds of song ideas and like dozens of what I think are actually like quite good melodies and ideas and stuff. And so it's a matter of like just go through some of those and like revisit. Like I was in bed, I woke up and was just drinking coffee in bed the other morning and went through like my favorites folder, and there's like 50 or 60 voice memos in there of just unfinished ideas. And I listened to one and I was like, this is great. I wrote this like a year ago, and I sat down and I wrote the whole song in like an hour, and I finished the song. And I hadn't written a new song in like a few months, and it was just kind of hilarious where it's like, these things are all there. Like it's all there. It's all here. Yeah. It's inside. Like it's prompting. It's engaging. It's like just coax it out, you know?
Yeah. It's, I'm glad you have a favorites folder, because it just feels like at a certain point that like 3,000 voice memos is just too overwhelming to even go through. So
they're
you're
not
just
all
like,
good song ideas. I will say that much.
But you're just like, this is just too many ideas. I'm not going to go through these at all.
Yeah. And a lot of them are like the same song, but it's like 5 different takes of one because you're writing it on the spot and stuff. So I should really filter those out. But yeah, it's funny.
Yeah. What has been helpful about doing co-writes? Like whether a song actually comes out or not. Like what have you learned from doing those types of things?
I think it just takes you out of like the limitations of your own kind of line of thinking. I've got this side project Moonface with a good friend of mine, Alex Shaw, and he lives in Nashville now. And we released an EP short record last year, and we co-wrote. Some of us wrote each, like I wrote a few songs, he wrote a few songs, and then we co-wrote a few together, finished a few of the ones together. And I think it allows you to, again, kind of raise that ceiling of what you think the song needs to be when you initially write it. Like one song, for example, I wrote this song Jonathan, and I wrote it about my small town Wisconsin that I grew up in is like 500 people. And I wrote it initially about a relationship between two like male best friends, known each other since they're kids, and their whole life dream is to get out of the town. And it very much is like kind of reflecting my own experience of wanting to leave this very small town as a kid. And I wrote this song, and it's all from Jonathan's perspective. And at one point, basically, they are in high school, and like Jonathan, the main character, still wants to get out, whereas his friend has like started doing drugs and is rolling with a different crew of people. And it's very obvious that like, oh, I'm going to leave and he's not going to leave. And that was like the storyline I had written for this song. And it was like very intentional. Like, this is what I want it to be like. And Alec and I had worked on the song. And for the bridge of the song, I do all the verses. We sing the choruses together from the perspective of Jonathan. And the bridge is actually, Alec sings it, and he wrote that. And it's from the perspective of the other kid. And it's this really cool, unexpected moment in the song where basically his character is saying, my dad's out of work and I'm actually supporting our family, and my mom doesn't know how to like go on without me. And so it's like you get this really unique perspective that you otherwise wouldn't have known about in the song, and it kind of explains why this other character that is so loved by Jonathan is incapable of leaving with him.
Yeah, it's just like he didn't follow through on leaving.
And it's like you could so villainize that person, but then you empathize with this really heartbreaking experience that they're going through. And like Alec brought that element to this song that wasn't there before, and like that's just an example, but it kind of like allows this world to widen in a way. And that's again just one example, but I feel like people just hear things that you don't hear naturally. And so another song like on my upcoming record, I have this song called Be My Friend, and it's like this constantly moving chord progression goes through the whole song. And I showed it to the producer for the record, Sam Weber. We co-produced the record together, and I showed it to him the night before we went in the studio. I was like, hey, I wrote this like a few years ago. I never finished it, but I really like the tune. And in the chorus, I changed it to like a 2-chord thing instead of the walk down that goes through the verses. And he's like, you just need to play the walk down the entire song, including the chorus. And I tried it once, and I was like, oh my God, this is what the song needed. And it just like, I think these ideas that we initially set for ourselves when we start something in the hard lines of how they need to be, we get so married to these old ideas that it's very hard, even if you try new things, to step outside of that box and kind of like allow this freedom to even try it.
Yeah.
Or try it without the idea of like, I'll try it, but I know I don't want it, you know? And so I think with the co-writes, it, for me at least, in the experience I've had with doing that with people, it's allowed like the ideas to expand a bit more.
Yeah.
Or like simplify more. So it's like, it's just funny. It's like different every time, but
Yeah.
I think it's allowed me like a wider lens and more perspective to look at what's actually happening. And it's like, is all this necessary, or is this missing something? Like, you know, each one's different, but
Yeah. Do you feel like that's often what Sam is doing for you, is like just helping you simplify in a lot of ways?
not all the time.
Okay. All right.
He's a really like accomplished musician with a great ear, and like I don't think he like tends to overcomplicate things in a way that I have in the past, but like he can do some very interesting and like technical stuff, but I don't think he like necessarily leads with that, which is a strength I recognize of his. I think he's got a great way to allow like the truth of the song to unravel, where sometimes again we have like these hard lines about what it needs to be, where it's like, what if we just allow it to happen?
Yeah.
You know, let's get in the room and just play this one part of the song for 5 minutes and then go from there. Oh, what happens next? You know, it's like, oh, that was the best part. You know, that actually transcended what I thought the song was in the first place, kind of thing. And so it's humbling, you know, because you're like, oh, I wrote this cool thing, and it's so profound, or like, you know, it's so heady. I don't know. It's so, again, it's like quite self-masturbatory, like in that way of like, of course you want to like believe in what you're doing, but it's I think it's such a hard line to not get a little pretentious with what you're doing. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Is it, have you guys been working long enough together now too, where he just knows the right way to push you when you when you need it?
I think he's like really good at prompting me. Like, I don't know if I'd say he necessarily pushes me, because he's like the first person I've ever worked with that actually produced a record for me.
Okay.
Where I had done 2 records and then a bunch of stuff with my jazz band, and I kind of like spearheaded and scheduled and was like dictating everything, for lack of better words. And with Sam, I very much kind of asked him to be a part of this as the role of producer and like curating and like taste making and production and all that type of stuff. And then when we actually got to the studio, we did like 2 pre-pro days for the record where we sat in a room and we played through everything with the band and just like experimented and tried to play and see where things could go. And when we actually got to the studio, as much as I kind of anticipated Sam taking the lead in that way, he really just, I feel like it was a conversation with the whole band, but he kind of just allowed things to happen. It wasn't pushing anything one way or the other. And if he had a suggestion, it was like, we're going to try this really quick. But it wasn't like, for this song, we're doing this, and this song, we're doing this. It was very much like, I would say, hey, this is the next song. This is what I imagine. Jump on these instruments, and we'll start just playing. And that was kind of how it unraveled.
Yeah.
So,
is there this examining of lyrics as well? Like, is there much of that gets
some of it
changed?
Some of it. In like the pre-pro days, like we had gone over things, and like one song we cut a bridge on, and like just kind of like trimming the fat, and again like simplifying, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm stoked for the upcoming record, because this recent EP, definitely my favorite tunes.
Thanks, dude.
That you've ever put out. And
I
again,
really
it just
appreciate
like
that.
the capture of it all just feels very alive and real, and just all the things that we have talked about today. You know, it feels like it's all
Thanks, Dan.
all coming through in the recording.
Yeah, it feels I don't know if more expressive is the best word, but it definitely feels just more of kind of an accurate representation of like myself as a person and like who I am.
Yeah.
So that's nice to hear.
Yeah.
I think the record's going to be, I'm really excited about it. We've been working for a while, and yeah, I'm just excited to like kind of, some of them are kind of older songs, like 4 years old, some of them. And so I'm excited to just kind of let it out in the world and then start working on new material.
Yeah.
You know how it is with the record cycle. You record it, and it's been quite a long time now. So, but doesn't make me any less excited for the songs to exist in the free listening world.
For sure. Well, it's been a pleasure to have you back on the pod. It's been a pleasure to get to know you these last 5 years.
Same,
and
man.
Have you not walk in here as a stranger this time?
Yes,
You know?
we're comfortable.
Yes. And thanks for taking the time to jump on the mics with me.
My pleasure, man.
Yeah,
Thanks for having me.
Just a great chat, and can't encourage people enough to check out your tunes and get geeked on this EP so you're ready for the new record, and check out the covers EP as well.
Yeah.
This is like some really
There's a pretty
great takes.
Yeah, there's a version of Kokomo that's pretty fun.
Yeah, it is. It is very fun.
Very island vibes. Big island vibes.
We end every episode of the podcast, Jacob, with the guest saying the tagline for the show, which is "It's a program." It means absolutely
It's
nothing.
a program?
Program.
It's a program.
It's the way my grandfather says program.
All right.
He always says program for some reason. It's incredible because he thinks he's saying program.
Wow. That's like my grandpa saying wrestling every time he says wrestling.
It's beautiful. It's a beautiful thing. You can deliver it however you'd like. It's the one time I'll ask you to look into that camera.
All right. And I just say it's a program?
Yep.
It's a program.
He nailed it, everybody. It's Jacob Miller. We're going to play the episode out with the last track on the EP, which is called Beautiful Thing. Just this super sweet love song. Do you remember anything in particular about this one coming together?
I wrote it about my partner, Victoria, which is like the first line of the song, but I was listening to a lot of this guy, Chris Staples, not Chris Stapleton, but this indie guy, Chris Staples, really awesome, like songwriter. The stuff feels very simple, but it's really just fun to listen to. Very like Elliott Smith influenced as well. And we had Alexis Mahler and Harlan Silverman do strings on this song. And I did the arrangement for it, and yeah, just really happy with how it kind of came out. Like I had demoed it in my room when I initially wrote it and was really hyped, and then to get everybody in the room at the studio and like live track it was super fun. And yeah, a nice little sweet, soft and sweet end to the EP. That's kind of all over the place and a little wild.
Hell yeah. In a Season of Loving is available wherever you listen to music. Links will be in the episode notes. Playing it out with a beautiful thing, and that is the Jelly Jams, and we will catch you on the flip side, Portland, or wherever you are listening from. Cool.
Thanks, Dan.
You're welcome. We did it. Thank you.
Yes.
We did a thing.
Feeling I get whenever you're near me, like a meadow in spring, a lost crown for a king, like being born new in a season of loving. It's a beautiful thing.